So hey, yeah, I'm Nathaniel. I joined MobLab almost 2 years ago. I did a master's program in experimental economics at the Economic Science Institute at Chapman University. And the faculty there connected me with MobLab. And so yeah, I joined in June 2017 during my during grad school at the Economic Science Institute at Chapman. We did a lot of research based on economic experiments, but I quickly realized that there's a great educational benefit to economic experiments. You could see that when students were in the experimental lab, that they quickly adapted their strategy and changed their behavior. The more experience they gained and the more insight into the underlying economic principle of the experiment they gained. So that's what motivated me to join MobLab and to really bring these experiments into classrooms to help students to develop an intuition for economic principles and fundamentals.
Yeah.
I think experiments and the experience that is created for the student in an experiment by interacting with their classmates really helps them to build an intuition and also an emotional connection for the underlying principles. It helps them to really think like economists and perceive the underlying theory from a different angle. It really puts them into that scenario and stimulates different areas in their brain and in their way of learning, which would not be stimulated if they would just study that topic in a textbook. So I personally really started to appreciate behavioral and experimental economics during grad school when I had the privilege to do my master's at the Economic Science Institute at Chapman University, where I was able to work together with David Porter, Stephen Recenti, and also the Nobel laureate Vernon Smith, who is can be seen as one of the fathers of behavioral economics, who was really one among the first who wanted to test economic theory in laboratories. As our co-founder and CEO, Walter Yuan, always says, experiments are very common in the natural sciences, in chemistry, biology, and physics. So Vernon Smith was one among the first who tried to test economic theory in the laboratory. So he was the first one, I think in the 1950s, who was able to prove that markets actually work, that they achieve highly significant economic efficiency, allocative efficiency, and that, for example, fundamental principles like supply and demand are not just merely a theoretic construct, but they actually hold what they promise, and that it is provable in a laboratory environment.
Cool, that's good.
Yeah.
Can we try, this might not be easy, but try this again, same question, but answer it in only 2 sentences, so it's like a shorter version.
Sure, let's see.
If you want to think about
Let me think about what I said. Okay.
All right. What is the importance of behavioral economics?
So behavioral economics and experimental economics really allows us to test economic theories in the laboratory in a scientific way. It allows us to test principles like, for example, supply and demand, which we know from, I need to start over. Let's see.
The first sentence is really good.
Yeah. What was my first sentence?
I just remember being like, yeah, that was good.
Right. Let's see. They allow us to test theories and principles in a scientific way, in a controlled lab environment. I'm looking for the final point, the concluding point that I want to make. So they allow us to test those things. So, sorry about that. I should have prepared.
what is the importance of behavioral economics?
So behavioral economics and experimental economics really allows us to test economic theories in a controlled laboratory environment in a scientific way. It allows us to formulate hypotheses and different treatments, which we then can test against each other, and based on the outcome, develop new theories and hypotheses.
Okay. What makes instructors excited to use MobLab?
So MobLab really allows the instructor to include all of his students, whether he teaches a 25 student class or a 500 student class, to include those students in one big experiment and have them interact with one another. Most experiments do not take longer than 5 or 10 minutes of class time. And the great thing about MobLab is that after the experiment, the results with detailed graphs and statistics are immediately available so that the instructor can continue to teach his or her students based on the outcome that was generated in the experiment.
What makes instructors excited to use MobLab?
So MobLab is a unique teaching tool that allows the instructor to captivate all of his students' attention into one activity, whether it's 50 students or 500 students. He can have all of his students interact in one experiment. And after the experiment, the results, along with detailed graphs and statistics, are immediately available for the instructor to continue his lecture, to debrief students on the outcome of the experiment and the underlying economic principles.